The phrase echoed in my mind now, but this time it didn't carry the same weight it once did. Family helps family. Yes, but only when it is mutual, only when it is respected, only when it is not used as a shield for entitlement. My finger finally moved, not hesitantly, not emotionally, deliberately. I tapped Cancel Passenger. A small confirmation box appeared on the screen, asking if I was sure, the kind of polite warning designed for people who still doubt themselves. I didn't. I confirmed. And just like that, Caroline Whitmore, business class, began to disappear from the reservation system I had paid for. One by one. Clean. Final. Irreversible. A soft notification appeared. Passenger successfully removed. Refund processing initiated. I exhaled slowly. For a brief moment, nothing changed. Caroline was still laughing. Ethan was still talking. The world was still turning as if nothing important had just happened. But I knew better, because in that same moment, somewhere deep in the airline system, a chain of quiet processes had already begun. I closed the app. Then I stood there, still, composed, waiting. Back at the counter, Caroline finally looked up. And that was when it began. A slight frown, a pause, a shift in her expression, the first crack in her certainty. She looked at the boarding passes again, then at Ethan, then back at the airline agent. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a little sharper now, "there seems to be a mistake." The agent typed something on his screen. His expression changed, subtle, professional, but unmistakable. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, "but there has been a change to your reservation." Ethan stepped forward now, his posture straightening. "A change?" he repeated. "Yes, sir," the agent replied. "One of the passengers in your booking has been removed." A silence fell, not loud, but heavy. Caroline blinked. "What do you mean, removed?" The agent hesitated, then glanced toward me, for just a second. And in that second, I understood everything. He had already figured it out. He knew exactly who had made that decision. And now, so did they. Caroline turned, slowly. Her eyes scanned the terminal, searching. Then she saw me, standing near the window, calm, unmoved, watching her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the airport faded into the background. Rolling suitcases, announcements, footsteps. All of it disappeared. It was just us. Mother, daughter, and everything that had never been said. Then Caroline spoke. "What did you do?" Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything. I held her gaze, steady, unflinching. "I corrected a mistake," I said quietly. Ethan stepped closer now. "This is ridiculous," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "There must be a system error. We paid for 3 seats." "Yes," I replied. A small pause. "And I did pay 3 seats." That stopped him. Caroline's expression shifted again. Confusion, then realization, then something else, something she didn't like feeling. Uncertainty. "Mom," she started, her voice softer now, almost careful. I took a slow step forward, not aggressive, not emotional, just enough to make sure she heard me clearly. I continued. I watched her carefully, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with something far more powerful, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, a quiet sense of closure. "Enjoy your flight," I added gently. Then I turned and walked away, not to board, not to argue, not to fight, but to reclaim something far more important, my dignity. Ethan handed the phone back to Caroline slowly, as though the weight of the situation had increased in his hands. "Let's not rush into anything," he said, his voice careful again. "There are still options." Caroline didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on me. "You planned this," she said quietly. I shook my head once. "No," I responded. Her jaw tightened. "You're punishing us." "Am I?" I asked. "Or am I simply declining to fund something I was told I wouldn't be part of?" That question lingered longer than anything else. Ethan exhaled, trying to reclaim the moment. "Evelyn, we can talk about this later. Right now, we're about to miss the flight." I glanced past them, toward the departure board. The gate number for their flight had just turned amber. Boarding soon. "Then you should go," I said. Caroline let out a short, humorless laugh. "And you'll just, what, sit here?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I will sit here." She stared at me as if I had suddenly become unfamiliar. This is absurd. Perhaps, but it's consistent. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, his composure thinning. "Look, Caroline," he said, lowering his voice, "we don't have time for this. If we miss the boarding window, we'll have to buy new tickets anyway." "I know that," she snapped, then hesitated. For a brief moment, something fragile flickered in her expression. Calculation again. The same thing I had seen in Ethan earlier. The realization that decisions have consequences. The price on the screen didn't change. Neither did the clock. Neither did the boarding call echoing faintly through the terminal, reminding them that time was slipping away. "Mom," Caroline said again, but softer this time, "we can fix this. Just reinstate the ticket. It's simple." I tilted my head slightly. "Is it?" Her lips parted, then closed again. Because it wasn't simple. Not anymore. "Even if I did," I said gently, "the message would still remain." "What message?" she asked. "That I'm expected to accept whatever is decided for me, without question, without consideration, without regard." Ethan looked away first. Caroline didn't. "I didn't mean it like that." But the certainty was gone now. "No," I agreed, "you meant it exactly like that." Silence stretched again, but this time it was different, less sharp, more uncertain. The boarding announcement echoed louder now. Final call. Caroline's shoulders tightened. For the first time, I saw something beyond control in her posture, something almost human. "Mom," Caroline said again, and this time it wasn't polished, it wasn't strategic, it was real. "Please." I studied her carefully. This was the moment she would later remember. Not the cancellation, not the price, not the argument. This. "Caroline," I said softly, "you are free to board your flight." She blinked. "What?" "Ethan, too," I added, glancing at him. "You both should go. You planned this trip." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Caroline didn't move. "You're leaving us here?" she asked, disbelief creeping back in. "No," I said, "I'm staying here." That distinction mattered. The final boarding call echoed once more, louder, more urgent. Ethan looked at Caroline. Caroline looked at me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Caroline turned sharply toward the gate, her composure snapping back into place with visible effort. "Fine," she said. "We'll go, and we'll deal with this later." Ethan followed immediately. But before he turned, he hesitated, just for a second. He looked at me, not with confidence this time, but something closer to caution. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "this doesn't have to become permanent." I smiled faintly. "No," I agreed, "it doesn't." Then he walked away. Caroline didn't look back. I watched them disappear into the crowd, moving toward the gate, their figures blending into the steady flow of passengers. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle. Not anger, not triumph. Balance. I adjusted my handbag, turned slightly, and began walking, not toward the terminal, but away from it. Because some journeys, I realized, are not about the destination. They are about finally deciding which direction you will no longer go. Without my card attached to the reservation, their family vacation suddenly looked very different. "What about the hotel?" Caroline asked him quietly. That question wasn't meant for me, but I heard it anyway. Ethan's shoulders tightened slightly. "The hotel should still be fine," he said. Should. Such a flexible word. Caroline turned back to me. "You said you're going home?" "That's correct." "So you're just leaving?" "Yes." Her disbelief returned. "Mom, the entire trip is already arranged." "Yes," I agreed. "And you paid for it?" "Yes." "Then why would you cancel everything now?" I looked at her for a long moment. There are times when a person asks a question because they truly want an answer, and there are times when they ask because they cannot imagine the answer existing. This was the second kind. "Caroline," I said quietly, "do you remember something you told me at the counter?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" "You said not to make a scene." She frowned. "Yes?" I gave a small nod. "And I haven't." Then I turned toward the terminal exit. Behind me, I heard Ethan say quietly, "Evelyn, wait!" But I kept walking. The automatic glass doors slid open as I approached. A rush of cool morning air spilled into the terminal, carrying the distant hum of traffic and taxi engines. Airports always feel different once you decide not to travel. The urgency disappears. The crowds stop mattering. And as I stepped outside into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because the truth was, this trip had never really been about Barcelona. It had been about something much closer to home. Outside the airport, the air felt cooler than I expected. It was early enough that the sun hadn't fully risen above the buildings yet, and the light had that pale morning color that makes everything look slightly calmer than it really is. Taxis idled in a long yellow line, drivers leaning against their doors or sipping coffee from paper cups, watching travelers rush toward the terminal. I stood there for a moment and simply breathed. It had been a long time since I had left a situation without explaining myself. For years, I had been the one who stayed, the one who smoothed things over, paid the extra bill, solved the small crises, or made the awkward conversations disappear. But today, I had done something unusual. I had walked away. My phone buzzed in my handbag. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Still, curiosity won. 3 missed calls from Caroline, 1 from Ethan. A message appeared next. "Caroline, Mom, what are you doing? Caroline, this is not funny. Caroline, call me right now." I slipped the phone back into my bag without answering. Across the pickup lane, a black town car pulled up. A driver stepped out, opening the trunk for a couple with matching suitcases. They looked excited, the way people often do when they're about to begin a vacation. For a brief moment, I wondered if Caroline and Ethan were still inside, trying to fix the problem. Probably. Airlines are excellent at selling solutions when travelers become desperate. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. "Ethan, we need to talk. Ethan, the hotel reservation was under your card." Ah, so they had discovered the first complication. 3 months earlier, when I booked the hotel outside Barcelona, the concierge had been almost embarrassingly enthusiastic. Old stone terraces overlooking the sea, olive trees lining the driveway, a restaurant serving saffron risotto with shaved truffles, and a dessert, creme catalana, prepared at the table with a small torch. Caroline had loved the photos. "Book the suite," she had told me over the phone, "the one with the balcony." So I did. The suite, the transfers, the dinner reservations, even the wine tasting tour Caroline had mentioned wanting to try. Everything connected neatly to one very specific credit card. Mine. Another message arrived. "Caroline, did you cancel the hotel too?" I smiled slightly at the screen. Technically, I hadn't. Not yet. But airline reservations have an interesting relationship with hotel bookings. When one piece of a travel plan collapses, the rest begins to wobble, especially when the person paying decides not to travel. I looked toward the road where taxis came and went in steady rhythm. For the first time that morning, I felt something certain. I was not getting on that plane. Not today. Perhaps not ever again with Caroline. My phone buzzed once more. A call. Lucas. I paused. Of everyone involved, he was the only one who had never asked me for anything unreasonable. I answered. "Hello, sweetheart." His voice sounded confused. "Grandma? Mom said you were already boarding." I glanced back at the terminal. The glass walls reflected the rising sunlight like a giant mirror. "No," I said gently, "I'm not boarding." A pause. "Oh," he hesitated. "Did something happen?" I considered that. "Yes," I said calmly, "something did." "What happened?" he asked again.
I watched a plane lift slowly into the pale sky, its engines roaring briefly before fading as it climbed. "It's a long story," I said. Lucas hesitated. "Mom sounds stressed." I allowed myself a small smile. That wouldn't surprise me. Another pause. Then carefully he asked, "Grandma, are you still at the airport?" "Yes," I said calmly. And Caroline had just spotted me. Her expression changed instantly. That moment when control slips was unmistakable. She walked straight toward me, fast. Ethan followed already on his phone. She stopped directly in front of me. "What did you do to the hotel?" No greeting, no warmth, just the question. I tilted my head slightly. "Good morning, Caroline." "This isn't funny." "The hotel says the reservation requires the card holder." "Yes, that's generally how reservations work." Ethan lowered his phone. "They won't release the suite without Evelyn present." Caroline turned to me. "So fix it." Her voice carried confidence, but I could hear strain underneath. "Call them, authorize the check-in." I studied her. Caroline had always been composed, but confidence only works when someone keeps backing it. "You should probably cancel the suite," I said gently. Ethan blinked. "Cancel it?" "Yes." "Caroline, Mom, it's nearly $3,000 a night." "I know. You already paid to deposit." "Yes." "Then why would you cancel it?" I adjusted my bag strap. "Because I won't be there." For the first time, her composure cracked. "This is insane." "Is it? You're ruining the entire trip over a plane seat." "No," I said calmly. "I'm correcting something." Ethan crossed his arms. "What exactly?" I looked at both of them. "For years," I said quietly, "I've been paying for things you treat as entitlements." Silence. "The condo, Lucas's tuition, the investment you asked me to stabilize, and now this trip." Caroline shook her head. And for the first time, the dynamic shifted.
"You offered to help." "Yes," I said, "I did. And now you're punishing us for accepting." "No," I met her eyes steadily. "I'm simply stopping." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything else that morning. Cars rolled past, taxi drivers called out. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed too loudly into a phone. But the three of us stood frozen, suspended in a moment that had suddenly turned irreversible. Finally, Caroline spoke. "So, what happens now?" "That," I said, "is entirely up to you." This is the moment people recognize, not the insult, but the boundary. The moment when someone stops explaining and simply stops providing. Caroline looked ready to fire back something sharper, but Ethan spoke first. "We can still make the flight," he said quietly. She turned to him, then back to me, then toward the airport doors. Another announcement echoed faintly. "Final call." And just like that, their carefully planned vacation balanced on a single uncomfortable truth. They could still go, but not on my terms. Caroline was the first to look away. She turned toward the sliding doors as another announcement echoed. "Final boarding for passengers traveling to Barcelona." Ethan checked his watch. "We've got about 20 minutes, he said. "For what?" Caroline snapped. "For you to decide." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not flying economy. That may not be optional now." "You're taking her side." "I'm taking the airline's side," Ethan replied calmly. "They tend to get paid." I watched quietly. This was different. Usually, Caroline and Ethan moved in sync, polished, aligned, untouchable. But now something was cracking. Money that wasn't mine. Caroline turned back to me. "Are you really leaving?" "Yes." "That's it?" "Yes." "No apology?" I considered that. Then I smiled slightly. "Would you like one?" Her eyes narrowed. "That's not funny." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." Behind us, a family rushed toward the entrance, tired, hurried, holding on to too much luggage and too little time. Travel has a way of revealing people quickly. Caroline crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." "That's possible." All of this over one comment? It wasn't one comment. She opened her mouth to argue, but I continued. It was the assumption behind it. Silence again.
Caroline's expression hardened. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Make things bigger than they are." I shook my head slowly. "No, Caroline, I've been making things smaller for years." That stopped her. Ethan exhaled, realizing this was no longer about a flight. "The plane leaves soon. You can either upgrade, take economy, or we walk away." "Walk away?" she repeated in disbelief. "Yes." You gestured toward me. "After everything she paid for?" Ethan didn't answer right away, because he understood something Caroline didn't accept yet. It wasn't available anymore. Caroline looked at me again. "You planned this." "No," I said calmly. "You created it." The doors opened. Another announcement. "Gate closing in 15 minutes." Time was running out. Caroline hated losing control. I'd known that since she was 12, when she rearranged her entire birthday party because two girls refused to sit near each other. Even then, she believed problems could be managed, but this wasn't something she could rearrange. She couldn't rearrange the person holding the money. "You're not serious," she said. "I am. This is childish." That's one opinion. Ethan stepped in again. "Caroline, we need to decide." "You're really walking away?" she asked me. "Yes." "And you're not fixing anything?" "No." "Not the flight?" "No." Another pause. Then Ethan spoke. "All right." Caroline blinked. "What?" "We're not going." "You're giving up because she's being dramatic?" "I'm being realistic." The words landed harder than she expected. Caroline looked between us, confused now. "This isn't making sense." Ethan hesitated. "There's something you don't know." Her expression changed immediately. "What?" He looked at me briefly, then back to her. "Our finances aren't as stable as you think." That silence felt different, heavy. Caroline stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ethan said slowly, "we're not as liquid as you think." Her face shifted, confusion, then disbelief. "You told me everything was handled." "It is handled." "That doesn't sound like handled." Because it wasn't, and in that moment something shifted. Caroline wasn't just losing a flight, she was beginning to understand something far more unsettling, that the life she thought she controlled might have been held together by someone she had just dismissed at a check-in counter.
Caroline looked at Ethan as if she were seeing him for the first time. "What do you mean we're not liquid?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but edged with something sharper. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be choosing his words with unusual care. Normally, he spoke quickly, confidently, like numbers and decisions belonged naturally to him. But now he hesitated. "The account took longer to recover than expected," he said. Caroline stared at him. "You told me it was stable." "It is stable." "That's not the same thing." "No," he admitted. The airport noise continued around us, rolling suitcases, taxi engines, distant announcements, but the three of us stood inside a very different kind of silence. Caroline folded her arms tightly. "How much?" she asked. Ethan shifted slightly. "Caroline." "How much?" she repeated, sharper this time. He hesitated again. Then, quietly, he said, "More than we planned." That answer clearly wasn't enough. Her eyes moved slowly toward me. "You knew about this?" I shook my head. "No." Ethan looked uncomfortable. "She didn't know the full details," he admitted. "Full details?" Caroline repeated. "What full details?" Another pause. Then Ethan said the one sentence he had clearly been avoiding. "The initial loss was larger than I told you." Caroline blinked. "How much larger?" Ethan inhaled slowly. "About 300. For a moment she didn't understand. Then the number settled. 300,000? She said. He nodded once. The silence that followed felt almost physical. Caroline looked stunned. "You told me it was under control." "It is under control." "How exactly?" Ethan glanced toward me again, and this time Caroline followed his gaze. Understanding arrived slowly and uncomfortably. "You covered it," she said to me.
I didn't answer immediately. Technically, I hadn't covered the entire amount, but I had provided enough capital at the right moment to keep everything from collapsing. Sometimes the difference between failure and recovery is simply time someone else paid for. I helped, I said. Caroline looked back at Ethan. You said it was a temporary loan. It was. You told me the money was coming from the partnership reserve. Ethan didn't reply. That silence said everything. Caroline's voice dropped. So our stability, the condo, the school, all of that, she looked at me again, was because she kept supporting us? Ethan finally spoke. It wasn't like that. But Caroline shook her head slowly. No, she said, it was exactly like that. The realization settled into her expression, something heavier than anger. Not outrage, but embarrassment. Because suddenly the story she had been telling herself for years no longer made sense. The successful life, the careful social circle, the elegant dinners, all of it had been supported by something she had treated as ordinary, my willingness to help. Caroline looked down at the pavement for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You never told me." I gave a small shrug. "You never asked." Another silence stretched between us. Then Caroline lifted her eyes again. The sharp confidence she usually carried was gone, and when she spoke again, her voice sounded smaller. "Mom, why didn't you say something before?" I looked past her, toward the airport. Planes leaving, passengers boarding, life continuing exactly as it always had. Then I answered honestly, "Because I thought you already knew." Caroline didn't reply right away. She was still looking at me, but her expression had changed again. The sharpness had faded, replaced with something far more uncertain. "You thought I knew?" she repeated. "Yes, that we depended on you that much. I assumed you noticed." Caroline looked away toward the traffic lanes, where taxis continued arriving and departing in steady waves. "I thought you just liked helping," she said. "I did, but not like this." "No," I said calmly, "not like this." Ethan remained quiet beside her. For once, the polished explanations he usually offered had disappeared. He understood numbers better than most people, and right now, the numbers were telling a story he couldn't comfortably reshape. $300,000, a vacation that had just collapsed, a hotel suite that might vanish within hours, and a financial support system that had just walked away. Caroline finally spoke again. "You should have said something." "And what would you have done differently?" I asked. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Because the honest answer wasn't obvious. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she sighed and rubbed her forehead. "This whole situation is ridiculous," she muttered. "Is it?" I asked. "Yes," she said, but her voice lacked certainty. She looked at Ethan. "We'll figure it out." He nodded slowly. "Yes." It was a simple exchange, but it carried a very different tone than before. Earlier, their confidence had rested on invisible support. Now they were standing in a problem they actually had to solve. Caroline turned toward me again. "So that's it." "Yes." "You're leaving?" "Yes." "And you're really not fixing any of this?" "No." Another long pause. Then she said something I hadn't heard from her in a very long time. "All right." Just that. Not agreement, not acceptance. Recognition. She stepped back slightly, as if giving space to the decision that had already been made. Ethan glanced toward the terminal. "Boarding's closed," he said quietly. Caroline didn't even look. The trip was already gone. Instead, she looked back at me. For years, our conversations had followed a familiar pattern: request, hesitation, solution. Money moved quietly between accounts. Problems disappeared before they became visible. That pattern had ended this morning, and she finally understood it. "You're serious about stopping?" she asked. "Yes." Her eyes searched my face, looking for anger or guilt, but there was none, because the truth was simpler than that. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. Caroline gave a small nod. Then she turned to Ethan. "Let's go," she said. "Where?" he asked. She looked toward the parking lot, the taxis, the road beyond the airport. "Home." For a moment, none of us moved. Then I adjusted my handbag and stepped toward the line of cars. Behind me, I heard their footsteps move in the opposite direction. For the first time in many years, we were no longer walking the same path, and strangely enough, felt exactly right. After they left, I remained where I was for a few seconds. The airport continued moving as if nothing had changed. Cars arrived, passengers hurried, laughter echoed, arguments broke out. Life went on. I watched them cross the pickup lane. They weren't speaking. Ethan walked slowly, his earlier confidence replaced with something quieter. Caroline walked ahead of him, shoulders straight but softer than before. For the first time all morning, she looked like someone thinking instead of reacting. Maybe that was a start. My phone buzzed again. A message from Lucas. Did everything calm down? I replied faintly, yes, it did. 3 dots appeared. Are you coming home? I looked toward the airport one last time. Through the glass, passengers moved through security, carrying plans, hopes, and delays, some toward vacations, some toward obligations, and some toward conversations they had been avoiding for too long. Yes, I typed. I'm coming home. Good, he replied. That's probably best. I slipped the phone away and stepped into a waiting taxi. Where to? The driver asked. Manhattan. As the car pulled away, the airport faded behind me. The runway stretched into the morning light, and for a moment I watched another plane lift into the sky. People often talk about freedom as something dramatic, a bold decision, a loud declaration, but sometimes it happens quietly, at a curb, with a canceled ticket, and the simple decision not to explain yourself anymore. For years, I believed that helping my family meant absorbing every burden and smoothing every difficulty, waiting for respect to follow generosity. This morning, I learned something different. Respect doesn't grow out of endless support. Sometimes it begins the moment that support stops. The city rose ahead of us as the taxi merged into traffic, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't arguing, it's walking away.